contributors today. So my name's Don Grant. I'm with the Ocean Startup Project. And the nature of the project is we are trying to make Canada the best place in the world to launch and grow an ocean company. And so we are a collaboration between 6 different pan-Atlantic organizations. We have Creative Destruction Lab, we have Genesis, we have InnovaCore, we have New Brunswick Innovation Foundation, we have Springboard Atlantic, and then of course we have the PEI Bio Alliance. Along with those two, we have ACOA and Canada's Ocean Supercluster working with us as partners on this project to achieve this goal. We think this goal is achievable, and we've been working at trying to make it happen and get to being the best place in the world to launch, grow an ocean company for about the last 15 months. There's a lot of momentum, folks, and we're really, really pleased to have this group of people come together today to talk about all of the opportunity in marine bioresources and in the ocean sector generally. So just a few things about the project as we get going. You know, a big reason we think that we can be the best in the world is we have a lot of really strong ocean innovators in this country right now. On this slide, this is just a few of the companies. Sorry, we've gone too far here. These are just a few of the companies that are doing some really, really interesting things in the ocean sector here in Atlantic Canada and Canada more generally. Along the bottom, you'll see a lot of the companies that are in our very first Ocean Challenge cohort. So we accepted 14 companies into our first Ocean Challenge cohort last September, and they've worked with the project over the last 6 months and made tremendous strides. And you're going to hear from one of them today, which is Kavacha. Kavacha is based out of Prince Edward Island and has a really, really interesting idea that they're developing and working towards. So folks, one of the things I just want to make you aware of is that we've got $1.4 million in funding that we're going to make available to very early stage ocean tech startups this year. So we're looking for innovations in marine bioresources, offshore energy, fishing and aquaculture, naval and defense, shipping and marine transportation. We're doing this year in a bit different way than we did it last year. We have 3 different streams that we're working on here. And what we're really focused on in this project, again, is that very, very early stage. So we have idea stage, we have growth stage, and we have ocean shot stage. All of those stages are meant to be the very, very earliest stages in a company's venture. So I just want to talk and highlight the idea stream, because that's what we're trying to focus on predominantly. We want those new ideas. So if you have an idea, if you've been sitting at your desk and you've daydreamed for years about an idea that you have for a company in the ocean sector, now is the time for you to take that leap into entrepreneurship, take the risk. We're here to help you. We want to help with $25,000 to help you de-risk that validation of your concept. We want to help you with mentorship, and we have some of the best mentors in the ocean sector anywhere in the world helping us on this project. We want to create networks and partner connections for you as well. And at the project, we'll do that with you. And then we are conducting sort of virtual business development sessions for you as well. So if you apply and you get accepted and you receive the funds are just a small part of what we're offering to you as we move forward. If you have interest in this challenge and you want to learn more, we're having an information session on Tuesday, May 4th at 3. If you go to oceanstartupproject.ca, you'll be able to find a link to getting registered, or you can just go to that link right there. And so folks, we just want to stay connected with you. So these are places that you can find us and follow us, and we'd love to hear from you. And we want to help you as you start out on your ocean startup journey. I'm going to bring in Chidich now from Kavacha, and Chidich is going to come on. Chidich is an entrepreneur. He's one of our early stage founders that we accepted into our very first Ocean Startup Challenge cohort. Very dynamic founder, really, really interesting guy, has a very interesting concept. He's actually even done a pivot while he's been involved with our project. And he's going to tell you just a little bit about Kavacha and what he's doing. Chidich, over to you.
Thank you, Don. Am I coming through okay?
Yes, great.
So I'll just echo what Don said. One of the really wonderful things about working with Don and Eric over the last 6 months is not only the wealth of knowledge that they bring, but this intuitive grasp of where the gaps in opportunity are, how big the opportunity is, and where the partnerships are. And that is hard to replicate, at least in my opinion, and I may be biased. They are well on their way to making this community the best place to start ocean tech. In my opinion, it already is. With that, we are Kavacha. We are making clean protein possible, and I'll just try and go full screen to see if that works. Okay. And we are doing this by tackling a really hard problem of fouling, which simply put is just unwanted growth. And it affects large industries. It affects the shipping and marine industry. It affects the aquaculture industry. It decreases the efficiency, whether that be fuel or feed. And it also stresses the asset, whether that be a vessel or fish stock. All in all, it is 15 to 20% of costs that have to be accounted for if fouling becomes a major concern. Our focus, what we are zoned in on right now, is fisheries and aquaculture with a special focus on onshore and nearshore farming, because we believe that's a big part of the solution to the surging protein demand that we face. Now, we do this by using a key building block that is abundantly available. Deacetylation of chitin, which is one of the most abundant biopolymers, gives you chitosan, and it has this wonderful interplay where you can play with the charge of it, where you can couple it with different things. Having worked with it for a while, the synergistic activity of chitosan allows it to be used in a large number of applications. It is being used right now in biomedical applications, in things such as biomimicry, where it is used as a bulletproof vest. So the range of applications that chitosan has makes it a real wonder material. Now, some of you have suffered through this punchline, and this is true in the case of chitosan. And even for a specialized grade that you want for your given use case, it can be less than $1 a gram. And with the abundant availability of shellfish waste and the focus on sustainability in Atlantic Canada, this place is geared to literally be a world leader in the field. Now, we use this material to tackle the issue of marine debris, which is biocides and microplastic that not only affect the food that is on your plate, but remote regions of the ocean. And it is causing a devastation in the ecosystems. We are putting a number on how big that effect is. Our effort, whole effort, is to take plastics and pesticides out of these fisheries, so clean protein is brought directly to your plate. And we do this through field-tested coatings and composites with a team that has worked on this issue for a while. Through our experience, we've had the opportunity to partner with a number of folks in development and distributions, people who are interested in early adoption. And in these 6 months have been a real eye-opener for us, especially for aquaculture, an area which we were not very familiar with. And the product market fit, finding where the gaps are, has been a key part of our exercise as we get these coatings and composites for use cases. Shout out to the startup yard, which has been beneficial. We are incubated and has been beneficial in founding some of the partnerships. Thank you, Shelley. The Cape Breton University, our research partners, a fantastic team over there, have come in with their own research resources to work with us, and we are super excited to having them as part of the journey. Please join us if this is something that interests you. If you're curious about what we're doing, please send us an email. We would be happy to work with you. Thank you, Don, for the opportunity, and I look forward to learning from the panel.
Thanks so much, Chidich. That's fantastic. And again, anybody on this call who thinks that they could in any way support what Kavacha is doing or want to learn more about it, please reach out to somebody at the project or reach out to Chidich. What makes this ecosystem so special is the fact that people step up and really want to help out these early stage founders and see if we can get them on a really solid foundation so that we can turn this into the best place to start, grow, and foster an ocean company. I'm going to bring in Rory Francis now. Rory is the CEO of the PEI Bio Alliance, and he has put together one of these collections of people that is really, really impressive. And I think about what the PEI Bio Alliance has done in PEI and just in the bioresources community. And it's one of the reasons that I think, we can be the best in the world. The Vashurin Center as well in Cape Breton and what Beth Mason's doing. And then the rest of this panel is so interesting. I've had the opportunity to talk to Russ Kerr a year or so ago, and his story is fascinating of how he came to PEI and how he has developed his company and now part of a larger multinational. So, Rory, I'm going to turn it over to you. I really thank you so much for doing this, and look forward to hearing from this great panel and yourself.
Thank you, Don. Really appreciate the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As some of you who've probably been on previous sessions like this one, it's a pretty informal conversation with among friends, and I think it's a great opportunity for those that are perhaps newer to the sector to expand your network, get to know a little more about who is who and who's doing what, perhaps in areas that are particularly important to you from a technology standpoint or a business development standpoint. So this particular panel is framed around marine bioresources, which is a fairly loosely defined term, quite frankly, but one that we've used around the ocean supercluster table to define an area which is really more about the development side of industry, and in particular areas that include marine natural products, fish health and nutrition, fish waste bioconversion, macro, micro algae development applications, etc. So, as I say, not terribly, narrowly defined in any sense of the word, but today I'm really pleased to have a panel of people who I'm quite pleased to say are all friends and colleagues of mine, and so one needs a lot of friends and colleagues in this business. So these folks have been very generous with their time today to join us. Lots to talk about, so won't take up any more time. We'll get right to it and introduce those colleagues. I will name them, and then I'm going to really just start into asking them to do a little more discussion about who they are and what they do currently in the marine bioresource sector. We have Kira Salonius, who's the CEO of Provivo. Kira is in Oslo, Norway. Randy Peach, who is a senior sales technology expert in the fish health world, currently working with Zoetis, the largest animal health company in the world. Russ Kerr, who is I think his proper title these days, if I get it straight here, a research fellow with Nautilus Croda Biosciences, and Beth Mason, CEO of the Vashurin Center in Cape Breton. Beth, welcome. And thanks again to everyone for joining us today. I'm going to start in that same order, I think, and just ask each of you to say a bit about who you are and brief background on your company. We're going to go deeper a little later, but Kira, why don't you kick it off and do your intro, please.
Sure. Hello, it's almost 6:30 here in Oslo, Norway, and I'm a Canadian. Probably most of you know, but maybe not the audience. So my growing up was with this entrepreneurial company, which was originally founded on PEI and became Novartis Animal Health. I took the opportunity to come here to Oslo because there was some really good development going on within the NMBU, which is the veterinary school in Oslo. We started a spin-off company called Provivo, which was born in an incubator type environment like the Bio Alliance. And now we are in what I would consider a scale-up phase. So utilizing principal technologies about mining marine microorganisms for the or enhancement of aquaculture species. Yeah, that's about it.
Thanks, Kira. Randy.
Thanks, Rory. It's appreciate you having me here today, and it's great to have the opportunity to talk to you guys. So yeah, Randy Peach. I work with a company, as Rory mentioned, called Zoetis Animal Health, but more specifically, the aquaculture division of Zoetis, which is Pharmac AS. So Pharmac is the largest fish health company in the world, oddly enough, and we have three divisions, which is Pharmac AS, which focuses on vaccines and therapeutics, Pharmac Analytic, which is a diagnostics company, and Pharmac Fish Tech, which does biodevices, primarily vaccination machines. So like Kira, I actually started in the fish health world quite some time ago with a same small company actually called Aqua Health here in Prince Edward Island. And we grew up through the ranks of that company, and eventually that company became Novartis Animal Health. I left there before Elanco actually took it over and did a few different things within the bioscience sector here in Prince Edward Island, and eventually ended up back in the aquaculture world with Zoetis. So couldn't really keep me out of the aquaculture scene, I guess.
Thanks, Randy, very much. Russ.
Thanks, Rory. Yeah, pleasure to be here and meet or virtually meet all of you. Yeah, so I'm a research fellow, as Rory correctly remembered, with Nautilus Biosciences Croda. So Nautilus is a relatively small research unit based in PEI, part of Croda International PLC. So Croda is a multinational based close to York in England. Some of these big multinationals that sort of nobody's ever heard of. If you're not involved with them, you won't have heard of Croda, but it's a FTSE 100 company, if that kind of puts it on the map for you. That have thousands of products in a wide variety of areas. Areas in which Nautilus works include personal care, pharma, so for a new interest for us, and crop care. Where Croda, as I say, have thousands of products. One of their favorite taglines is that we all use a Croda product every day of our lives. We just don't realize we're doing so. So you don't see the Croda logo on the back or on the back of the bottle or the front of the bottle, but they supply ingredients to companies like P&G or L'Oreal, and we're familiar with those companies, and they sell their products to you and I. So one example of a recent product, the vaccine delivery mechanism in the Pfizer vaccine comes from Croda. There's a liposome or lipid-based delivery mechanism, which is very important for vaccines, these new mRNA vaccines, and Croda supplies all of the vaccine delivery components for Pfizer, as one example. Yeah, I guess I'll talk more about Nautilus later on, but we're a small research unit within Croda. We are, more specifically this in one sentence, I guess, a marine microbial natural product discovery unit. Sorry, I'll stop there and mute.
Thanks, Russ. More on that later. Beth Mason.
Hey, thanks, Rory, and thanks for the invite. Yeah, I'm CEO of the Visuren Center, which is a standalone, not-for-profit, small business, basically helping small businesses scale. And that's our mission. So I think we fill a space in the ecosystem for companies that have come through incubators and accelerators and need to make that next step, which I think we might talk about throughout the day here. And that is to expand the size of what they do, to meet market need, to get offtake partners. And so we do that through actually provision of large technical capacity. Particularly one of the areas is in the marine extractions area, but also expanding our capacity in industrial bio. And that gives companies the chance to come in and utilize the technology platform on the basis of our investment, but come and use a shared space and grow their own technical capacity alongside our team. Basically, that means they hit their next investment milestone, which is their key in a company's development stage. So we tend to focus on companies coming in around TRL 5, and exiting around 7 to 8, ready to go to commercial scale. So that's the environment we work in, and our business model is a collaborative model whereby we're connecting companies with the resources that they need, not just the technical, but partners in the ecosystem that can bring investment, can bring more capital, fund HQP, and grow a company's teams. So that's the model that we work on.
Thanks, Beth. Just a reminder, I know that Don may have mentioned it, but we are going to have time for questions from the audience as well. So I think the plan is to have you, if you do have questions, post them on the chat line, and Don's going to keep an eye on those, and we'll make sure we get your questions in. So we're not going to take up all the time. We'll make sure there is some for your questions. Kira, back to you. If you could kind of talk a little bit about maybe this is kind of focusing on the startup world and kind of what it takes to work from the startup into a scaling business and so on. And you've got the intestinal fortitude to be doing it more than once in your life, because AquaHealth was a pretty small company when you were early with them, and now here you are doing it again. So maybe just talk about that, if you would. Maybe comment on what's your background first in terms of business and science, and then maybe comment on the startup world and what it is that really intrigues you about what you're doing again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the attraction to the startup world is really value creation and having a control of the whole ball of wax, basically. I mean, it's really interesting to be involved in that and not just be sort of providing a small technical input here and there. AquaHealth, as Randy's experiences as well, was an entrepreneurial company. I think there were like 6 staff members when I joined in 1990. This is really going to date me too. And we were making vaccines, and it was attractive. We had 80% of our market in global export markets because the Canadian salmon industry wasn't so numerous or contributive on the global footprint. So we sold to Norway, we sold to Chile, we sold to the UK. That was good experience, and obviously when Novartis purchased the shares outright from the founders of AquaHealth, that was a really good economic boon for the entrepreneur who started AquaHealth, but he went right back to entrepreneurialism, as you know, Rory, and everyone else does. So some people just have a tenacity for it. You have to have a risk tolerance. You have to be able to be comfortable. I think the guy who spoke first was saying something about being able to pivot, be flexible. I mean, there is a character to entrepreneurs, definitely. But what I think perhaps Randy and I did both over the kind of 20 odd years that we've been working in larger companies is something that you can compress into a learning module for people doing startups and innovations. I don't know if some of you on the panel and also in the audience have heard of the 24-step disciplined entrepreneur program, but it looks toward teaching or converting the thought process of a founder to be able to address some of the times painful issues like, what's your value proposition for your product? How is your business model? How will you get it there? Because in essence, I mean, there are many, many good ideas in the funnel in early research, but whether you can really realize that innovation in effect in a product in the market is the most critical point. And that this program is basically what we learned, I guess, in a very disciplined environment of, say, Novartis, but you can learn it as an entrepreneur in a very short period of time. So I would encourage, if that's not possible, and then perhaps they could have access to such a program. And I'm sure through the Ocean Supercluster, things like that are being taught to entrepreneurs who are coming in with kind of rough diamonds and in terms of business potential.
Thanks, Kira. Great comments. Randy. over to you. Same question. You've both been in startups, as Kira mentioned, but through your role as a mentor in our emergence incubator, and even on your own in your own steam, you've been involved in a lot of early stage and startups. Some thoughts perhaps on the startup world and some of the challenges and opportunities.
Sorry, I was muted there. Thanks, Rory. Yeah, so I guess I didn't get much into that. So obviously my day job is with Pharmac and Zoetis, but I still do some work in my spare time with early stage companies, and have had a lot of experience in the past working with early stage and younger companies and more innovative and I think nimble companies in my past. And I think, you know, some of the advice I could give in terms of early stage companies would be, you know, similar to what Kira was talking about. You really need to, and it's not just know your market, because that's what everybody says. You know, everybody tells you to know your market, but it's a little bit more than that. It's know your business. So you need to know what the supply chain looks like. You need to know what the raw materials are and where they're from and how accessible they are. You obviously need to know your market. You need to know how products get to market. You need to understand what the regulatory environment is. And back to Kira's comment on the business model, you also need to understand, you know, where are you in that business model? Some early stage companies or more, you know, academic like technologies like to think that they're going to develop a technology or have an innovation that's going to be immediately bought up by this huge multinational, and they're going to fund all the development work and take it to market. And that happens sometimes, but it doesn't happen all the time. And I think it's important for entrepreneurs to understand that when they go down that road, you know, they may need to go down further down the development path than what they had initially intended. Because, you know, it's all about risk management, and if you understand the market and you know what the market needs are, finding funding and support and partners to help develop that is going to be crucial. And you know, it's going to be difficult sometimes to identify people that's going to help you take products to market. So sometimes that means you have to do a little bit more of the legwork on your own, and you know, have additional trials done. In my world, it's the fish health world, so the regulatory process is very important in that world, and sometimes companies and technologies have to be taken a little further down the road than what some people would like, and some people are prepared for. So I think that would be my biggest advice is understand what the business is, understand how things get to market, and understand what the path is to get there.
Thanks, Randy. And I can't help when you're kind of commenting on some of those key items. I see that Byron Beeler has joined us. Byron's one of our team mentors in Emergence. He's also former president of Novartis Animal Health. And Byron has taught many of us over the years that the most important question is, who's your customer?
Who's your customer, yeah.
And there's a lot more to that question than meets the eye, but think about who's your customer. So welcome, Byron. Russ Kerr, over to you. Russ, maybe some comments. You were an academic who became an entrepreneur, and the rest is history, so to speak. So fill in some blanks for us there, would you?
Sure, happy to. First, apologies for the phone going off earlier. I just arrived back from out of province travel, and the government is trying to keep track of me, and I'm supposed to respond within an hour, I think, or they come and knock on my door. So we'll see what happens. You might hear a knock on the door in the background. If so, I may go and get it. I apologize for that in advance.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so my background is a bit different. I started off my career as an academic in Florida. I got into the marine chemistry, the marine natural products chemistry, really from a postdoc. And I don't think it really impacted me at the time. It may have later on, but I did my postdoc for a guy called Carl Gerasi. I don't know if that name rings with anybody, but he passed away a few years ago, but he's known as the father of the pill. So he was an academic and left his academic appointment, quite a prestigious one, to go down to a little town outside Mexico City to learn how to take an extract of yams, so natural products, and transform that into a compound called norethindrone, which is the active ingredient in the contraceptive pill. Then came back to academia, and the rest of his life is history, quite well documented in his case. So I was exposed to an academic having entrepreneurial goals and ideas, and incredibly successful in his case. So the company he started was Syntex. I'm sure many of you in the pharma space be well aware of Syntex. It was the original producer of, the world's producer of the contraceptive pill. So a huge impact on global society. And so that's my background. And so I started my own lab in Florida, at Florida Atlantic University, in the marine natural products field. So the interest came from my postdoc. And in the background, I guess there were some ideas of doing something entrepreneurial. But while I was in Florida, I started up a center of excellence for basically for marine drug discovery, bringing together private industry, government, and academia. And I was the director of the center, and I was running around saying, yes, academics should be commercializing the research with private companies. And it's tough for academics to work with private companies, with the big multinationals, the big pharma type folk. And so I thought maybe I should sort of walk the walk instead of talking the talk. And I started up my own first spin out, which was Knowledge Biosciences Florida, so take one. And so that's when I got into the private industry in my first spin out. And basically, just to follow that story through, I moved to PEI a couple of years after starting Nautilus in Florida. Perhaps not great timing, but I moved the company up just about a year after I moved up here to Charlottetown. I grew the company from here. So that's sort of where Nautilus came from. I guess to finish the story, but to further build on this, Nautilus was acquired by Croda 3 years ago. I guess I'm coming back to a comment that both Kira and Randy made very nicely, is that the need to pivot. So the business plan that was written for Nautilus by myself and Don Ridley, good friend and colleague, we never did any of that stuff, right? In the initial business plan, we changed completely, not completely, but we modified the initial business plan for opportunities that came our way. And I think that need to be nimble, especially when you're young and small. One needs to be nimble and be aware of opportunities and be able to respond to them quickly, or they'll pass you by. So maybe that's good for now. Rory, just a little bit about where Nautilus comes from, my background, and I guess one piece of advice: it's being nimble is a good thing.
Thank you, Russ. Very good. Beth Mason, welcome. Perhaps you could comment. You've been in the private sector for many years with big companies, and now working in the Assurance Center and through your whole a lot of work you've done establishing a whole technology platform there. And now you're working with earlier stage companies as clients and partners. So maybe you can kind of talk about your experience with startups from that perspective.
Yeah, well, thanks, Rory. I understand their pain. I've started a number of companies myself, so it can be a lonely world as a startup or early stage venture. And I think one of the things I would say is by way of solutions to that is, number one, as Randy and Kira both identified, is identify your potential customers and try to early on be connected in a way that you can do true customer discovery. And I think this speaks to, something that, both Kira and Russ said in terms of having to pivot. When you do true customer discovery, you may find out that, what you think you're selling is not really what somebody needs to buy. So your widget's not really what I need. And so I think that is, something that through CDL people learn fairly early on, and it's really critical that you are connected with the market. it's too easy to pull those numbers off the internet that show, you know, multi-billion-dollar markets in natural products in this area, but that's not you necessarily. You're not the next unicorn that's got those billions. You may be in the millions, and there's going to be a lot of those, and that's why it's so important to position exactly where you fit in the market. And so that's one thing I would say. And then the second thing would be, from experience, is finding, you can never afford enough people as a small company. And therefore, you need to be a little bit creative about where you find help. Because as I said, it can be a lonely business, starting a business. And so try to align yourself within the ecosystem where there is help, such as things like the CDL and you know, other lab to market like the supercluster organizes. And I think that will connect you with people that can help. And having a mentor probably is the next best thing to establishing who your customer is going to be early on. And just because you identify your customer early on doesn't mean you've exposed yourself to dilution. And that's always a concern with a company where you've got your technology and you need to grow it, but you need to grow it in a protected environment, and that can be challenging. So I think, you know, what I would say is it doesn't mean that because you've identified your potential offtake partners that you need to give up the home in that process. And so that, in that regard, I would say also make sure that you have plentiful advice on protection, appropriate protection and structuring of the business, so that you can gain investment without excessive dilution at an early stage until you get to that higher value proposition. Because obviously, you know, much of the talk around small business is where do you exit? And both of our partners on the panel, actually all partners on the panel, have done that exit. And that is a lot of the focus in many business programs. So that exit is most beneficial if you're structured well to begin with. So that's my piece of advice.
Thanks, Beth.
Can I comment, Rory, and just pick up on some of the things that Beth said?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you said it was informal, so
Yeah.
I just want to pick up and maybe elaborate a little bit more, or comment on some of the things Beth said. I think I agree. It's a lonely world out there. That's absolutely, when you're, you know, you're trying to start your company and you're short on people and you're trying to bootstrap. It's definitely a lonely world out there. But I would comment that I don't know if there's a better place to be than Atlantic Canada, and I don't know if that's a shameless plug or not, but there's a tremendous amount of resources here and support available within all the provinces and regionally that startup companies can draw on, and I think take advantage from and get the support for all the things we're talking about. So we're identifying some hurdles and some challenges that you might be faced with, or you might come up against. But I think there's lots of resources here and lots of people, you know, Beth mentioned CDL, you know, Rory's here from the Bio Alliance and Emergence. There's lots, and there's many more. I couldn't even name them all. There's lots of resources that are out there within the ecosystem that I think can help support early stage companies. And another piece of advice, if we're given advice, would be to take advantage of those, like connect with as many people as you can, network with as many people as you can, and learn as much as you can. I think we're in a good position here for early stage companies.
Thanks, Randy. I'm going to go kind of reverse, Beth. I'll put you back on the spot again in this one, and I just want to talk about maybe unmet needs in industry. And everyone's in a little bit different sector. Randy and Kira are probably closest in terms of the aquaculture space, but unmet needs. So where are the opportunities, if you will, and maybe put that in the context of what you're doing now yourself. You're creating a whole platform here to go after a particular type of opportunity that you've seen and others that you're working for have seen. So maybe it gives you a chance to talk about the platform you developed, but also kind of what you're after in terms of those opportunities in commercialization technologies.
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of our keys is scale. And you know, some products you can do at the bench, and you can get a fair ways in terms of trialing your product and testing in formulations with other companies at some stage. But other products, you need large scale to produce, sufficient to connect with an offtake partner. You know, large partners that you're going to connect with can't make a formulation to test your product if it's only in the milligram amount off the bench. And that's the space that we aim to fit. And we've done that with 12,000 litre capacity marine extraction platform and 1,000 litre industrial bioreactor platform for things that would be more along the health side of things for animal and crop health. And the marine is focused on marine extractions. And that kind of is off the back of one of my own companies that we started in BC, where we were lucky that we actually happened to be poor pig farmers at the time of starting this business. But that meant that we had a space we could bring in, you know, a big generator with 600 volt power, you know, a big hammer mill and all the things you would need to scale what you did to basically do trials with a local feed company. We were lucky that we could do that. So to find places that have that big a capacity for power, production, extraction, purification is challenging. And that's really the space that we are filling right now, both on the marine is focused on obviously, like say, natural products extraction from anything that peculiar that crawls along the ocean floor. And including all the byproduct streams, which that's a business that'll roll out of the Verschuren fairly shortly this year, is on the marine co-products extraction stream. And then, as I said, on the industrial bioreactor scale, that's synthetic biology engineered strains producing specific molecules for health applications. And that capacity too is very limited across Canada. And what there is right now is tied up by pharma because of COVID, as you can well imagine. And so, you know, our plan here is to expand that capacity so that the non-pharma based natural products and ingredients and actives can have a space to grow. So that's kind of, I think, where you know, to Randy's point, this ecosystem has, I think, with that, every step of the way support for how you need to grow. And you know, not to belabor a point, but I think Randy's right. Atlantic Canada is unique in that capacity. So we can now support companies right through that pathway.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Beth. You remind me, though, that what you folks are doing and what is happening in Prince Edward Island and other parts of the region in terms of natural product chemistry, you know, it goes way back, and I think Don Ridley's on the line here, but Don was part back in 2002 of a group who looked at essentially a roadmap in the region when the NRC's Institute for what was called the Institute for Nutrasciences and Health in Prince Edward Island was being established, and establishing that focal area in marine, not just marine, but natural product chemistry in particular, and that area, which is what brought Russ Kerr to Prince Edward Island some years later, and so on. So these things are, I think we're really establishing in the region a very important center in Canada and in the world in this area of natural product chemistry. We need to continue to build on what you folks have been doing for some years now. I think it's a great opportunity and a unique one for the region. So we'll keep at it. Russ, perhaps if you could you know, talk a little bit about the where you see the big opportunities in terms of applying the technology platform that you developed through Nautilus and that Croda has invested in now, you know, for the startup folks around the table and others, you know, where do you see the opportunities? How big do you think that opportunity is in terms of applying some of those tools of natural product chemistry to unmet needs in society?
Yeah. Okay, I've got a couple hours. We could get started on this, just to get started though.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, boy. Well, okay, so in Nautilus, we're really taking the API discovery process, so using microbes, in our case, marine microbes, as a source of natural products. That's a tried and tested route to APIs, right? The vast majority of our antibiotics and cancer drugs and so forth come from microbes. Increasingly now marine rather than terrestrial, but of course there are plenty of examples of terrestrial derived microbial natural products. So in terms of opportunities, so we can take that, and we are within Nautilus Croda, taking that natural product drug discovery approach to every market that Croda can think of. Right? So Croda already has thousands and tens of thousands of products. So we're now looking at applying natural products to all sorts of areas where the current or traditional sources have been petrochemical derived molecules produced by synthesis. And the opportunity here is to meet what the public is demanding, and the public is demanding natural sourced compounds or chemicals for everything possible, right? So the public is increasingly aware of the hazards, the environmental hazards, and the costs of petrochemical derived feedstocks. The public is aware of the carbon footprint. So if a molecule is produced by several chemical synthesis steps, that's not acceptable anymore, or it's becoming increasingly unacceptable. And so, hence, if a new startup can identify a current product which is produced by sort of chemical methods, synthetic methods using perhaps a petrochemical feedstock, and find a biosource, a fermentable source of that molecule, then that's something that will be of great value. Challenge is the cost, and we're running into that within Croda. So we have found some very exciting new molecules. I won't talk about them in specific. I'm not allowed to for obvious reasons, but some a new class of a particular type of molecule will rival current molecules in terms of performance. But these current molecules are produced for pennies on the pound. I'm exaggerating, but they produce it very inexpensively because their markets have grown over decades. For us to produce a competitive molecule by all the right methods, it's from a natural source, it's produced by fermentation in water. We can avoid any organic extractions, ticking all the boxes except the last box, which is cost. And that's a really, really tough one. So the biomanufacturing, so I don't think anyone's actually said that word yet in this panel, but we've been sort of talking about that, and Beth certainly was. So that's a huge challenge. And so the challenge we're having at Nautilus is, so we're quite good at fermenting E. coli and yeast, right? But we're not very good at fermenting these weird filamentous fungi that we pull out of sponge tissue from a tropical reef in Palau. Or, so Nautilus has built up this very diverse, taxonomically diverse collection of bacteria and fungi. And that's where we go mining to look for our new anti-X molecules. And so we've had quite a bit of success in discovering new anti-X's. But a challenge that we're bumping up against over and over again is scaling up production of the molecule of interest in these fermentations. One approach one can look at, again, as Beth mentioned, so thanks for these introductions, Beth, is looking at, so I call it the heterologous expression. So cloning the gene of interest, the genes that make your chemical, cloning it from your weird marine bacterium and cloning it into an E. coli. So that's a route, but to do that at scale, that's a multi-year process. And Croda just had a conversation with a very talented biotech company in the UK. I think their proposed bill was something like £5 million for a 2-year project. And we don't want to wait 2 years. And we don't really want to spend £5 million for something that may or may not work. So the scale up production of these exciting molecules is a huge challenge. I guess that's an opportunity for the startups out there. If you can address that, that's not a marine problem, it's just a biotech problem. If that can be addressed, then that would be something that's very significant. I could go on with other challenges, Rory, but I think perhaps I'll stop there and we can address some of these other ones later on if that fits with everybody.
Excellent, Russ. No, that's great. Thank you very much. Yeah, Randy, from your perspective, I don't know which hat you want to put on. Maybe put on the Pharmac hat for the moment.
Yeah, so I would still have to echo a lot of what Russ is saying. And actually, I was making notes as we're talking, and Russ kind of got into it. So I think, you know, a lot of the market perception or consumer focus is on sustainability. There's a lot, you know, everybody's talking about sustainability in different forms, you know, from developing products that, you know, are less invasive or less intrusive or safer for the environment, they're safer for people or animals. So those are the buzzwords that everybody's talking about and everybody's looking at. But I agree with what Russ is saying, in that there's also a feasibility component of that often gets overlooked. And we can find the next best thing, but if it can't be commercially produced feasibly, and the cost is a big factor of that. But there's other components you got to consider too. So from a pharmaceutical company perspective, you know, they look at regulatory feasibility. So is there actual opportunity to get this product through a regulatory process that can get it to market? Are there real claims that can be made? So that's a challenge for some of the natural products that we work with, because of the way they're made or the nature of the compounds. Sometimes the regulatory process can be challenging or even unknown. You know, sometimes novel things that we're working with don't really have a regulatory path. So that the feasibility there then is more challenging for a big pharma company to tackle. The other is as Beth and Russ both mentioned, is manufacturing. So if the manufacturing systems are so complex or so different even than what the larger companies are using, then getting them to adopt is going to be potentially challenging, especially if it means changes to existing product lines. So a more specific example I can probably talk about is a lot of companies talk about, in the vaccine world, talk about different adjuvant systems. And for human health and COVID, there was a unique opportunity there for companies to bring different adjuvant systems, because really there was no consideration of cost. So it was, you know, the sky's the limit. But for most products, I think, that are in the market, developing new adjuvant systems, certainly in the animal health world, would be, it's not impossible, and we're always looking at new adjuvant systems that we can potentially employ. But for a lot of animal health products that are polyvalent, which means they have more than one protective agent in them, it becomes increasingly difficult to change the way those things are manufactured. So there's a lot of things that have to be considered from a manufacturer's or supplier's point of view, outside of, you know, is it something that's environmentally sustainable? You know, there's a lot of things that have to be considered, from manufacturing to regulatory to costing is huge. And I think that's where I was initially talking about, you know, understand the business, know what you're up against. You can have the next best thing, but if there's an economical solution that's already in the market, although it may not be the best, it's still going to be difficult to change people's minds on that.
Thanks, Randy. Kira, I know you think a lot about the big picture of technology commercialization beyond, you know, your own, you know, business and your previous experiences, but maybe talk about, you know, the market that you folks are in now, to the extent you can talk about your new technology and where you're going, and perhaps again some observations on the larger world of aquaculture and fish health and some of the areas of opportunity.
Yeah, to Randy's point, I mean, companies in aquaculture and salmon farming and other species are looking for sustainable solutions. They're looking for environmental green solutions, but those are hard to come by with the major threats that are facing the aquaculture industry, like parasite attachment and sea lice, for instance. So, but the regulatory environment is certainly something to look at. It's a very structured and, let's say, stifling innovation type environment, because if a pathway or a route doesn't exist, or there are no extensive published literature references to the topical API or biological product solution that you're offering, then they suggest that is not a proven thing as a natural product, for instance. So it's almost a catch-22. You can come with a very disruptive innovation and a very a sustainable solution for a major issue, but it could also be tied up in the fact that it doesn't have the round peg into a round hole type of approach. So there are progressive type environments, and you really have to understand your stakeholders. So for instance, in our case, using a probiotic, microbial organisms as live cultures to enhance fish microbiome and robustness means that we had to consult with the Food Safety Authority on the consumer aspects. We had to consult with the Department of Environment on the risk to the consumer, the environment, and to the target animal species. You have to have on side at least the medicinal regulators, so that they know that they don't have to regulate the product as a drug, for instance, or as a vaccine. So there's a lot of toying around with classification, but certainly I think the other point that I just wanted to comment on in the interim is the scalability. I mean, you can invent ways to get around scalability issues with biofermented products. Unfortunately, we were I guess we thought we were ingenious to use a bioreactor approach with single-use bioreactors here in Norway to do that, because as Russ and others on the panel know, investment in large-scale fermentation equipment is a very costly business and usually requires a permanent footprint for your business. But you know, nobody could predict COVID. So now all the vaccine manufacturers are buying up the single-use bioreactors. And I think we've been something like 46 weeks with a late delivery on certain critical components and other things. I mean, you just, when you do business and you get good at it, you have to kind of at least spend some time doing risk analysis about what possibly could happen, where your major business risks are, and that's all part and parcel of maturing your business. And if you present that to investors, and we were lucky enough to fairly early on have an industrial investor who invested in our company, gives you the bit of security that maybe a 50-50 split between soft funding and founder or initial investors will not give you. You can only grow a certain way along the path, you know, with maybe $1 million in public funds and $1 million in founder and early investors, what they call angel investor kind of types. And eventually you have to, the catch-22 is that they want you to show significant growth and traction, which means you have already entered into a commercial pipeline, but you don't have the funds to be able to grow the capacity of your business. So the two options then are to kind of, you know, off-sale your technology to a large player like Aker BioMarine in this case, or I think Russ mentioned the UK company that Nautilus is working with. I mean, that's a double-edged sword, of course, because then they really do understand that they have something unique and in a biosector that could be valuable, but they still try to kind of massage it into kind of a, I wouldn't say widget sale, but at least a lot of people in the investment community are looking for the kind of IT, you know, visit 80 companies, get response and sales from 20 of those 80 that you visited. I mean, it's just, the limitations, for instance, for the aquaculture business are that it's a very consolidated industry. So you have about 10 major players, say, internationally, and maybe 60 entities within those international companies that you could distribute your product to. So the whole idea is, if it's very disruptive, very innovative, not normal for people to think about, then you first have to have a whole educational piece, a whole collaborative approach to developing that product close to your customer, and then move on to kind of telling them what they should the sale process. I mean, it's not a sale process at the beginning. It's an educational piece, and definitely you have to give them their reasons to believe, which, to a point about somebody expressed the idea you have to know your customer. It's not just to know the company or what they do or how they produce or what they're after. It's almost down to an individual. So sometimes you have to know the personality of the key decision maker in the business unit that you're trying to sell to. What drives them? What's their pain? If it's a veterinarian, maybe their pain is they feel disheartened every time they go home and they have fish dying, So it really comes down to, business is about people. It's not just about numbers and concepts and technology. It is people in the end of the day.
Kira, you're so good on segues, because I wanted to get to the people side of things, and there you did it. And in two ways, maybe, because I know we're going to get to questions here. After this question, we'll get to the questions from the audience. But let's, I'll move on to Randy. We'll kind of come around again on the question of the people relationships in two ways. Randy, will maybe comment on what Kira's saying about the get down to the nitty gritty of knowing, the customer. Let's assume you're a company that is trying to commercialize the technology through a strategic partnership with a bigger partner. Let's just take that example, and knowing enough about that partner to determine whether they're the right one or not. Maybe let's focus on that. Let's just answer that question first. I think I was going to ask again also about, the other challenge for early stage companies is building a team. You're one person, and that's going to take you a little ways, but not very far before you need to add, people to your team to actually execute on your business plan, and just some thoughts on that, because that's a pretty traumatic step as well for entrepreneurs, to start bringing in other people, like-minded or not, filling gaps in your, maybe you're strong in one area. How do you find someone to complement what you bring to the table? So I'm putting a lot on in front of you.
Yeah.
Take it away.
That's another 2-hour session right there. Yeah. So the first part about, I think I would echo what Kira said. Really, it's when you're talking about understanding, the customer, and I think the customer is who's going to buy your technology, right? And I'm looking at Byron. For some reason, Byron's right in front of me. So and I've heard Byron say it lots of times, is know your customer, but your customer isn't always the end market or the consumer, and not everybody quite understands that. So you may have a new technology, and we'll stick with aquaculture for now. And hopefully the audience understands aquaculture enough to know what I'm talking about. But you may have something that you think the aquaculture industry needs, but your customer could be a feed company, or it could be a pharmaceutical company. So, what the end user needs, yes, that's important to who your customer is, which is the middle person or the middle company. You need to understand what their drivers are. And to Kira's point, you're talking to people, and individual peoples may have different drivers and different priorities. A lot of times that's guided by company strategy. So you can, those things are quite often, I wouldn't say readily available, but you can find out that information by talking to people and reading, reports and those sorts of things. But you really need to identify who the key individuals are within those companies that you need to have conversations with. And, in the bigger companies, they can be business development people, and there's lots of ways to meet them at shows and conferences and whatnot. But those are the people that understand, you know, they have objectives for every year, and they understand, okay, what is it I'm looking for? What's my target? They may have a list of 3 things a year that they're looking for, or over a series of time. And it's really important to understand that. And I know that may sound a little prescriptive, but that's the reality of it. It's people you're talking to. And if you realize quickly that the person you're talking to is not interested in what you have or what you're selling, then, you know, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time with that person. You just move on and find the person that is interested in what you're talking about or what you have. So that's kind of, I think, my advice for you know, dealing with bigger companies, where I think, you know, quickly understand that who's making the decisions and what their priorities are. And if you can help with that, great. And if you can't, move on. So I think that would be my advice there. On the team side, that's a loaded question for sure, because there's nothing more important than a good team, especially for a startup company. I think it's important for every business and every organization at every level. You know, I work for a company called Pharmac, and although it's the biggest aqua health company in the world and part of Zoetis, which is the biggest animal health company in the world, the feeling and the culture within the company is actually quite innovative. And we, you know, for a big company, it is quite nimble, and we do, you know, we are thinking entrepreneurial. So that for me, when I joined Pharmac and Zoetis, was quite refreshing. But, you know, and I think it's because of the team. So we have a team that's focused. We have common goals. We're all rowing in the same direction, and we're all trying to get to the same end place. So that makes it really important, is when everybody has a common, you know, a common goal in mind. I think for smaller companies, that, you know, I think it's equally important. I think if you have a good team around you and everybody's focused on the same objectives and focused on doing the same thing, and everybody's buying in to what you're trying to do, I think you can be successful. I think, you know, in smaller teams, if you don't have everybody working together, it can be quite disruptive. So I think teamwork, and those are soft skills, right? It's hard to really pinpoint. You can have the smartest scientist in the world, or the smartest development person in the world, or the best manufacturer in the world, and if they don't work within your team and within your corporate culture, and even an N of one can have a corporate culture, if they don't fit within that culture, then it's going to be difficult to make it work.
Thanks, Randy. Beth, some observations on the people side.
You're catching me on mute here. Yeah, I mean, Randy's spot on, but I think on the teams thing, like, you know, as you said, Rory, you may be a team of one. What you need to do is to recognize your gaps and to try to fill those with people who have complementary talent. So, you know, oftentimes very early stage, and you see this in the incubators companies, you've got your science team, but you don't have that business. And one of the challenges is bringing, you know, being able to bring that business person to the table in that early stage, so that they're complementary. There is a lot of, you know, Atlantic Canada in particular, support financially for hiring HQP, particularly at a higher level. So I would definitely look to tap into that. As far as, you know, again, connecting with company needs, NPC often presents, Natural Products Canada, opportunities with companies. So there may be specific things that, you know, to Randy's point, that a company's looking for a solution to. That's a perfect place to position your product. So I strongly suggest connecting with others in the ecosystem like NPC, and looking, keep an eye on what's the challenge, you know, to Kira's point. You might have the best things in sliced bread, but if there really isn't someone looking for that solution, and a solution that fits an existing environment, that can fit within the regs, then you have a greater challenge. So again, comes back to that customer discovery. But on the teams piece is a big one. As we said, it can be a lonely place. So you know, I think a lot of accelerators do a great job right now of connecting young entrepreneurs with other people to fill their team. And that's really important. You don't get there by science alone.
Thanks, Beth. I think that last statement is very important. You don't get there by science alone. Russ, some comments on the people side of things from you. And then we're going to go to questions from the audience.
Sure. Yeah, so people obviously is really important. It's interesting. So when we're talking about talking to Crowd about the acquisition of knowledge, so what was being acquired? Basically, it's people, right? The collective knowledge and expertise of at that time 12 people. So as that group that I was lucky enough to assemble, that's what Croda acquired. And so yeah, getting that team together is everything. Without the people, I'm not a chemist and a biologist and a geneticist and an engineer and a bioinformatician and I'm actually none of those things right now. I know what I am. Jack of all trades, master of none, I think is what I do. So it's really challenging to bring in to assemble that team is tough. But I think if a young company has some exciting ideas, right? You got something really innovative. You got something to offer a young, new scientist, a master's, a PhD, a bachelor's, whatever the stakes that person might be. If there's something exciting to offer that person, then I think they'll come. I think you can assemble a team. In what was nowhere, Charlottetown, 10, 15 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot happening before the BioAlliance got rolling. Now there was a whole lot happening. But it was a bit more challenging, I think, back then. But when there's something exciting to offer, one kind of attract people. I attracted PhDs from France, from Spain, from the US, within Canada, and to Charlottetown. The challenge, and so pre-Croda days, the challenge was people would come in, or be faced. One person left Merck in Spain to come to Nautilus Biosciences pre-Croda in Charlottetown. It's going to be a very stable position to come to a high risk, high gain sort of environment. What I did to sort of mitigate that risk, was the mitigation, but in addition to the kind of modest salary I could offer, was that I gave the senior people a little piece of the company. The message was, if we all work hard together and there's an acquisition, then everybody's going to benefit. So that was part of the strategy, I guess, I used to attract top people, senior people, to the area. In terms of attracting junior people, the technicians to really run the place, we're very lucky in Atlantic Canada. Certainly in PEI, we have some outstanding biotech training programs. There's a new accelerator involved in this called CASTL, CASTL, that's there to really enhance what's been happening at the local college, Holland College. So I think we've had a very good supply of technicians in Atlantic Canada. With a tremendous growth, I think it's a challenge now because there are many new companies coming in and we're all looking for young, smart people, just young, but smart people of any age, often young. So yeah, I think, I don't know if that's offering much wisdom to anyone, but I'll stop there. I think, Roy, just to give us some time for the questions that I'm sure will be coming.
Thanks, Russ. I would offer that the other thing that matters in terms of that talent, you need to build a team, and the whole conversation here is that we've got a group of people on this panel who are great leaders. And if you don't have great leaders in the company that can bring other people in and see a future that they want to be part of, then you're probably not going far either. So I just want to make that comment. I think leadership is hugely important at the early stage of these companies. So Don, I'm going to ask you, maybe since I don't have the chat open, perhaps you could pose a few of the questions from the audience to our panel members, and we'll get into the questions.
Yeah, thanks so much. We can actually thank Caleb Seward for pretty much all of the questions, which is great, and great to have him on board. The first question goes to Beth, I think, at Verschuren Center. Caleb asked, what type of equipment is available, and in brackets, extraction equipment and bioreactors, for example, for use at the Verschuren Center, and what is the cost process associated with getting access to that? So very specific question.
Well, we won't bore everybody else with the finer details, but basically we have all the fermentation and industrial bioreactors as the central piece. And then we have, at the same pilot scale, most of the downstream processing, which is a part that a lot of people forget about. You can grow what you like, but can you get the product out? And so we have membrane separation, we have various types of non-chemical extraction processes. We have cell separation and spray drying soon to be in place. So those are just some of them. The mechanism to get in is we have a conversation about where you are, and what you need, and figure out whether we can fit those needs, and then develop a work plan and a service agreement around that. So that's where our budget would come in. Just depends on what the need is. So.
Thanks, Beth. I hear nothing but great things from companies that have collaborated with the Assurance Center, so definitely look into that. Russ, the next question is for you. Have you looked at kelp, sea cucumber, or other non-bacterial marine organisms for API compounds? I'm not going to go into the editorial, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. No, that's a good question. So at Nautilus, we really focus on marine-derived microbes. Basically, the mantra is biodiversity equates to chemical diversity. And so in our freezers at Nautilus, we have about 7,000 or 8,000 different species. Some species loosely, it's, if you're a microbiologist, you'll feel my pain in using that word. We call different species of bacteria and fungi from the Arctic to the Amazon, from very different geographic areas. So taxonomic diversity is king. And so we can keep several thousand different organisms, different species in a few freezers. And they can bring a little piece of a bacterium, a small bit of the culture, ferment it up in basically any scale we want to, and produce within limits as much as we want to. Whereas working with plants, macroalgae, other invertebrates perhaps, one can't keep thousands of macroalgae in a small space. So for that reason, where we focus on microbes, but really the main guiding force for Croda behind all of its biological sources is that the source of a natural product has to be obtained sustainably. We don't have any environmental or minimal environmental impact. So if a kelp can certainly be, that's one example that you mentioned. It's a great example. So people have been harvesting kelp for decades, right? And obtaining natural products from kelp. We don't have any kelp derived that I know of, any kelp derived products within Croda, but that sort of thing would be fine. So if a seaweed can be harvested sustainably or farmed, that would tick the sustainability box. So that would be, that'd be something we'd be interested in looking at.
There's somebody who wants your phone number or your email address too, Russ, but I'll let you deal with that. One other question. Have you looked at using solid state fermentation for production of filamentous fungi? It allows for cheaper production.
Answer the question is yes, but it's impossible to scale to levels that we want. What's quite difficult is translating production we see on solid medium to liquid medium. Quite often production stops. But we do a lot on solid and rice on semi-solid as well as liquid. But for large scale production, producing hundreds of kilos of natural product, solid fermentation is very limiting.
Okay.
Yeah, good question, good point.
Terrific. And Kira, one question for you is, how do you identify people that you can grow and that can grow together and work together? And what are some of the critical traits associated with that?
Yeah, that's interesting for sure. I mean, and I mean, a long time hiring people for the R&D team in Novartis Animal Health with our facilities that used to be there. It was more technical. You were looking for a person with a certain background that can actually fill a specific need. But when you have an early phase team, you almost look more for, well, of course, people need to be qualified in the role that they're going to fill, but they also have to have that own, almost like a founding staff member or a founder of the business has, that the risk versus conservatism, and especially in Norway, where there's a huge governmental and institutional workforce, highly educated group, and they seek jobs that are basically tenure track positions in institutes and stuff. And so you have to be careful at the first place that you can attract people that both have the qualifications, but also are looking for something out of the ordinary. And to Russ's point, you obviously don't have the salary run to be able to offer them, really lucrative kind of, government institutional type of wages, nor the security, but you have to attract them with a balance between risk in offering options, for instance, and a blend of that and share and straight salary. I mean, people have to be able to live and eat, and you have to eventually, as you mature, do some compensation analysis to make sure you're competitive. But at the early phase, then you get a certain character of person who for whatever reason is willing to take more of a chance with the beginnings of their career, or even in the middle of it, or are looking for an opportunity to do something completely different. So.
Mm-hmm. That's it for the questions from the chat. Rory, I'll turn it back over to you to close us out, and then we can, if people can hang around, we can go into some breakout rooms and do a little bit of networking. We're running a little short on time, but I'll turn it over to you, Rory, and then come back to me, and we'll get people in the rooms.
Thanks, Don. Well, just really to say thank you. I mean, I've had the easy job today. You bring a bunch of brilliant people around the table with great experience, and just let them run. And I think it's been a great opportunity for the audience to hear what's happening in some fascinating areas of marine bioresources. Great advice imparted, I think, by my friends and colleagues here, and just want to say thank you. Thanks, Don, for the opportunity to bring some light to the marine bioresource area. And thank you to all our friends in the audience for joining us today. This is all happening in Atlantic Canada, folks, and there's in Norway, but curious part of our backyard here.
I'm trying to get back, right? We're bringing the business back.
Stay tuned. Just stay tuned. You'll hear more from Kira here. But it has been a real pleasure to host the group today, and I hope everyone is as impressed as you should be with the experience and the dynamism, the technology, the experience, and the business side that's happening here in Atlantic Canada as part of the ocean ecosystem. So thanks, Don. Thank you, everyone.